I just wanted to comment a couple of wins and fails that I've seen so far for this part of session. Certainly some really good Oklahoma Senate Democrats bills moving forward, things that put people over politics, education, affordability. Glad to talk about any of those bills that you see on the list. I want to mention how pleased I am that all the hard work the Democrats and especially the educators in our caucus have done on the Oklahoma Commitment, which is our long-term vision for education and trying to make sure we're advocating for the voice of educators, the voice of parents in the broader conversation around education. The Strong Readers Act updates included a lot of those provisions and requests from Senate Democrats, and I'm really pleased on that bipartisan, the work that we're able to do. Really working across the aisle to support kids and teachers, and that may mean that our members may not have their name on the bill, but they're certainly helping contribute to better long-term outcomes for kids. I was pleased about some of the strides for health. We had Senator Mann working on Alzheimer's, Hicks working on diabetes, Dossett working on the 211 system that helps people across the state, Senator Nice working on food policy. I mean, I'm just really pleased with those health-related progress. On the fails side, I just want to say, further infringing people's rights, policing poor people about their food on SNAP, voter suppression, our election laws are already secure, limiting care for people who happen to be LGBTQ. So I'm afraid that we spent a lot of time not focused on real problems, and that continues today. And we barely nibbled around the edges on insurance affordability. We did pass something that I think can make a difference, but pushed the implementation back a year and a half. So while they're talking about cutting property taxes, ASAP, we're going to let insurance companies raise their rates by 50 or 100% for another year and a half. And so that concerns me. What do you guys want to talk about?
Can you just elaborate a little bit about the nibbling around the edges on property insurance reform?
Yeah.
What was accomplished exactly?
Well, so Senator Reinhardt and Racino worked on a bill that, not that unlike the bill that I had that failed in committee, works on shifting our property insurance process for rate increases. Right now, if a corporation wants to raise their rates, they just do it. And then they tell the the insurance commissioner after. So they can raise their rates right away. With this bill that passed yesterday, if it goes through, it'll switch that. So they have to file their rate increases before they take effect. And it would require the insurance commissioner to have people really analyzing those costs to see if they make sense. Right now, we don't do that analysis to say, are these excessive rates? They took out of the whole scenario competitive versus uncompetitive rates, which is the way that the insurance commissioner said that he couldn't analyze if a rate was too high. This bill, if it goes through, will mandate the insurance companies turn in that rate information, and then the commissioner can have the opportunity to reject rates, which has not been the case for many years. Big change. I don't.
It's Rosino?
Yeah, it's Rosino and Reinhardt. It's in the 1500s, but I can't remember.
There was quite a bit of stalling from some members yesterday in the Senate. Just what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is the challenge when you're in the legislature and you are not running the agenda, you're not running what gets chosen. And so I think you had some members in the Republican Party who did not feel heard, and they decided to ask questions. For me, it was refreshing. As a minority party member, we do air those questions and ask those critical questions on bills that we think need to be heard. And so it was kind of refreshing to have some other people doing that work, because I think when people watch how we work, there's no public process for them to give input, and then they see us not even asking each other questions, they can tell that we're not doing the kind of due diligence we should to change the law. So to me, that part was refreshing. It's tiring, so there's some things that in terms of moving forward, we did vote with the majority to move us forward in terms of advancing, just because it's grueling to stay past midnight and try to actually make good decisions, So there's some limiting factors there.
They had a press conference on Tuesday with some of the health commissioners to possibly make changes in mental health agency itself, as well as their budget shortfall they have internally. It looks like the Senate passed a feasibility study bill yesterday. They would kind of do that study by next March. Thoughts on that? Input from other folks beyond just the cabinet level folks and appointees?
I believe that the legislature was telling the Secretary of Health not so fast, that that's not his choice to get to merge agencies, that's a legislative We in the state capitol have to discuss these things and really make good decisions together. And so I think that was what we were trying to say. I'm worried that they're doing it de facto by putting money in different places or having different people monitor programs. And so I'm especially worried around our consent decree, which is our settlement for people who need mental health assessment in our jails. Our wait list is growing. We have people sitting in jail who haven't even been convicted, and we're not getting them the care they need. That is not moving forward. The court said that we're not moving forward at the right pace. We're not keeping pace. And so here we have that getting pushed over to the State Department of Health. I'm really worried about accountability there. And so I hear a lot of language talking about past failed leadership, but we haven't taken the reins and really gotten the bottom of the financial issue. They're saying they didn't get enough supplemental, or the leadership issue, which we gave the governor the power to run these agencies. And I think that we can see that that's not worked well.
Do you think something might come out of that feasibility study is going back to a board system that would choose those leaders?
Yeah, I do think stakeholder engagement is important. I mean, when your legislative process doesn't have stakeholder engagement and this agency process kicked out all the community voices that were there, I think you've got a disconnect there on how things run, because running a huge health system is not just putting the money in place and doing it. You have to work with people. You have to work with local people. So we should have a process that has input. That's my thought. And I asked Senator Orsino ran the feasibility bill, and I asked him, are you going to include law enforcement? Who's the most impacted by mental health in our state? Law enforcement and our family caregivers are some of those who are most impacted. Their voice should be in that feasibility study, for sure.
As far as stakeholder engagement is involved, I don't know, you probably haven't looked at it a whole lot, but Paxton put his name on a joint resolution proposing a constitutional convention, and I don't know if you looked at it at all, but the first time that it was held, there was a lot of Native American involvement in that, and then this time it's just all legislators that would be involved in that sort of delicate process. As far as stakeholder engagement is involved, there would obviously be a lot less. It wouldn't necessarily be so bipartisan. There wouldn't necessarily be as much tribal engagement.
Yeah.
What do you?
I mean, I think, given the way we're running government right now, I sure think it'd be a dangerous time to have a constitutional convention. I mean, you have to have a thoughtful plan. You have to truly include people. You look at that history there. I mean, I would be very nervous. We're not going to do it well. I'll, of course, be reviewing the House bills next week, but I have serious concerns. We are not showing our ability to write policies that last long term, that really take into consideration all Oklahomans. So I think it'd be super political if it got thrown together. I think it would be thrown together if it's anything like the way the legislature's running right now.
Might it be an opportunity, considering the proposals around property taxes and the dozen other HJRs and SJRs?
I love the optimism, but I can't be very optimistic about it. The last time we saw a bill about a constitutional convention, the author told me it was because there were too many words in our Constitution. That is not a good enough reason to completely change the framework of our laws. And so I'd be real concerned about what we'd come up with.
When Hilbert was asked about this, he said that, if Democrats want more involvement, then they need to win more elections. Do you have a response to that at all?
I mean, there's a whole lot of people in this state who don't feel heard. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about people who are heard and not heard, people who are in power or not. There are more people in this state than the people who have money and power, and they need to be allowed to speak. They need to be a part of our processes. And you can't just say they didn't get in touch with me. They don't have time. They're working 2 jobs. How are we proactively seeking input and thinking about the least of these in our state? I don't trust our ability to do that. And anytime we talk about transparency, my colleagues across the aisle like to think we're talking about us, that we want the information. No, when we're talking about transparency, we know the public deserve to know what's happening with their government and how decisions are being made.
So about property tax, Senator Paxton had a bill that lowers the percentage increase, the maximum percentage increase for an evaluation increase. Is that the major reform that we're going to see, and is that satisfying to you?
So Senator Paxton's SJR seems to be the only property tax bill we've moved on the Senate side. Now, I know bills can come through the budget process because they always get thrown in there. That's the only one we've seen, other than in committee we saw one about exemptions. I mean, I think that I'm concerned that talking about reductions in future revenues is cuts, and so you can't imply it's not a cut now. I'm really afraid that I sure didn't vet that one as thoroughly as I could have. It went through rules last week. Counties haven't been able to weigh in. And then when we're looking at the impact of that change, we're only looking at state budgets. And what I'm hearing from counties is, well, that's going to really cut back what goes to schools. That's going to cut back what goes to our roads and bridges. So let's be real about that and know that these are permanent changes, right? So, I mean, is it better than the state question that eliminates it? Yes. Is it okay? No. I don't think we've really looked at the dangers. We are already filling in budgets for county government across the state when it comes to roads, bridges, security. This bill will not help that. I think we're going to be filling more gaps.
There was a bill on the Senate floor yesterday to create a new state agency, Department of Child Safety and Wellbeing, passed almost unanimously. But do you feel like that could bring true reform to DHS by creating a whole agency focused
I mean,
on that?
honestly, I wish we would take the same time with that change as we are with the mental health change. And I've told the senator, the author, that myself. I do think, let's look at it, because if we're just moving the chairs on the deck, that's not going to change government. We need to look at the root problems. If the problem for DHS is that we're not funding things well enough, or that they are dealing with problems that they can't handle because families are in crisis, let's deal with that. I don't think moving between agencies is going to help. We also need checks and balances. So I'm worried about that role that was created for the Commission on Family and Youth was supposed to be a check, because governments do badly when we put people in institutions. We've had problems in our juvenile system. Even last year in Tulsa, we had problems. And these are our responsibility. Something like OCCY needs to keep us safe, right? So I would want to know that there's true checks and balances there. So I would want more time to really vet it. Now, do I believe the heart of the author that he wants to do better for kids? Absolutely. That's why I supported the bill. So.
Talked a little bit about moving chairs on deck around, and there's been some talk about consolidating all of the Title IX funds into the healthcare authority rather than the many agencies it's divided between now. Your thoughts on that? Does that seem like it would do a lot to address issues with how those funds are used, dispersed, administered? Yeah,
I mean, part of the conversation around Title IX funds moving, I haven't heard that them moving between agencies is the problem. It seems to be that they don't have the matching funds, or they don't have the staff, or they don't have the budget increases. So I haven't heard that the actual moving those funds between agencies is the problem. And my understanding is Healthcare Authority's done a good job of holding them accountable. Sounds like mental health's big problem is that we haven't had enough resources for the expectations for what they should get done. And so let's deal with that. We increased 988. We just funded 988 this week. I'm glad that moved forward. Didn't have money in it yet, but 988 has created a huge opportunity, but it's also created a whole lot more patients, right? Because now we have a mobile crisis units across the state picking people up if they're in a mental health crisis. We pay for that, right? So we've created the systems that are actually costing us more, but the hope is then we're not paying for it on the other end in the hospitals and the jails. Those are the chairs we should be looking at when we're looking at, are we moving money from crisis to prevention? To me, would be the real valuable change.
What do you expect filing week next week? Do you expect that to be any kind of distraction from the work here, or just what are you expecting with next week? Yeah,
candidate filing next week, April 1st through 3rd. I mean, it's always exciting. It's interesting to see. There's surprises usually, and certainly everyone's fired up. I hope the public's watching and keeping track, because they're going to have choices this year. Anything, one more?
It looks like Senator Rader's bill to proposing a moratorium on the death penalty, enforcement of the death penalty, isn't going to clear the Senate. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So Senate Bill 601, Rader proposed a 1-year moratorium on the death penalty. I think it was a very reasonable, responsible bill given what we know about how we've applied the death penalty in this state, but it's not on the agenda. I've heard more about that bill than any other bill from my constituents who want it heard, because they say we need to actually get to the bottom of the information we've been shown about how we apply the death penalty, whether it's humane. I think barreling ahead with more executions when we have that information in hand is reckless. All right, we better wrap up.